The sun had just started to rise above the small town where the girl lived. Every morning she sat by her window before school, watching the orange sky while listening to soft tunes on her old radio. She didn't know much about music, but something about the sound of the piano always made her heart beat differently. She couldn't explain why. It wasn't just the melody. It was the feeling, the emotion behind every note. She used to imagine herself sitting in front of a big piano, her fingers moving smoothly across the keys, filling the room with music that spoke without words. But in her small town, dreams like that felt far away. Her family lived a simple life. Her father worked long hours at a workshop, and her mother did stitching work at home. They were kind people who loved their children deeply, but they didn't have the money for anything extra. Things like piano lessons or fancy instruments were simply out of reach. Still, the girl couldn't stop dreaming. Every time she heard a piano playing, whether on the radio, in a movie, or even from the church down the road, something inside her came alive. At school, she would sometimes peek into the small music room during breaks. There was one old piano sitting in the corner, a little dusty and out of tune, but it looked magical to her. She had never dared to touch it before. One day, while walking past the room, she noticed that no one was there. Her heart started to beat fast. She looked around, making sure no teacher was watching, and stepped inside quietly. The wooden floor creaked under her shoes. She walked slowly toward the piano, her hands trembling. When she touched the keys for the first time, it felt almost unreal. She pressed one softly, and a faint note filled the air. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make her smile. That small moment changed something in her. From that day on, she began spending her free time near that piano, just watching it or touching a few keys whenever she could. She didn't know how to play, but she tried to remember what she had heard on the radio. She pressed random notes, trying to make them sound like music. Sometimes she thought she could hear a little tune forming, and that gave her hope. But not everyone saw it that way. When a few of her classmates found out what she was doing, they laughed. "You? Playing piano?" one of them said with a smirk. "You don't even know how to read music." Another added, "Only rich kids take piano lessons. You should just stick to normal things." The girl tried to smile it off, pretending their words didn't hurt, but inside she felt embarrassed. That night she sat on her bed staring at her hands. They didn't look like the hands of someone who could play the piano. But then she remembered how happy she felt every time she touched the keys, and she whispered to herself, "I'll learn. Somehow." The next few weeks were not easy. She didn't have a teacher or even a proper instrument at home, but she refused to give up. She started watching free videos on an old phone her father had given her. The screen was cracked, the sound was weak, but it was enough. She learned what each key was called and tried to memorize basic notes. At first, everything looked confusing. Her fingers didn't move fast, and the tunes she played didn't sound like music at all. But she practiced every day after finishing her chores and homework. Her parents noticed her dedication. One evening, her mother asked gently, "Why do you keep watching those videos all night?" The girl hesitated, afraid they might think it was a waste of time. "I just want to learn piano," she said quietly. Her mother smiled kindly but sighed. "We can't afford lessons, my dear, maybe one day." Her father, who had been listening, put down his cup of tea and said, "If she really wants it, she'll find a way." His words gave her courage. That weekend, the girl started looking for ways to save money. She helped her mother with stitching work, delivered small parcels for neighbors, and saved every coin she could. After 2 months, she finally had enough to buy something, a small, second-hand keyboard she found at a local shop. It was missing a few keys, but to her, it was more precious than anything else in the world. She carried it home like it was treasure. That night, she couldn't sleep. She set it up on the small table near the window and touched it gently. It wasn't a real piano, but it was hers. From that day forward, the keyboard became her world. Every evening after finishing her homework and helping at home, she sat by the window and practiced. The same classmates who had laughed at her continued to tease her. Sometimes they would mimic her movements, pressing imaginary keys in the air, pretending to make terrible sounds. "You'll never get it right. They joked. She smiled but said nothing. Every insult just made her more determined. She started, keeping a small notebook where she wrote down every note she learned, every song she tried, and every mistake she made. Slowly, she began to notice tiny improvements. The keys started to sound more connected, the rhythms more natural. Her fingers still trembled, but her confidence grew. There were nights when her keyboard stopped working properly, and she had to press extra hard just to make a sound. She didn't complain. She fixed it herself using tape and glue. She loved that little keyboard because it carried her dream. Her younger brother often sat beside her watching quietly. Sometimes he would ask her to play the same tune again because he liked how peaceful it sounded. Those moments made her feel proud. Maybe I can really do this, she thought. But deep down she still wished someone could teach her properly. One day at school, the music teacher announced that there would be an open sign-up for the annual talent show. Students could perform any skill, singing, dancing, acting, or playing an instrument. The moment she heard it, her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to participate, but as soon as she mentioned it to her classmates, the same laughter returned. "You'll embarrass yourself," one girl said. "You can't even play one full song." The words stung deeply, but she didn't argue. That night she sat by her window, thinking for a long time. Then she opened her notebook and wrote one line at the top of a blank page. "I will perform in the talent show." It was her promise to herself. From that day, her practice sessions became longer. She played before school, during lunch breaks, and late into the night. Her fingers ached, and sometimes her eyes felt heavy with sleep, but she didn't stop. When the house was silent and everyone was asleep, she pressed the soft keys carefully so she wouldn't wake anyone. The moonlight fell on her face, and she felt calm, as if the world outside didn't exist. There were moments of frustration, too. Sometimes she played the same piece 100 times and still couldn't get it right. There were days she thought about quitting, but each time she felt like giving up, she remembered that first time she touched the piano at school, the thrill of hearing that single note, and she pushed herself again. Her mother began to notice the change in her daughter. She wasn't just playing for fun anymore. There was a seriousness in her eyes, a kind of quiet fire that couldn't be ignored. One evening, her father came home tired from work, and as he sat down, he heard her playing softly in the next room. He didn't say anything, but he smiled. "She's really doing it," he whispered to his wife. As the weeks went by, the girl's confidence grew. She learned to play a simple melody perfectly, and for the first time, she recorded herself on her phone. When she listened back, she couldn't believe it was her. It still wasn't perfect, but it sounded like real music. She played it for her family, and they clapped for her, proud and amazed. That small encouragement made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she was getting closer to her dream. One afternoon, she found herself again in the school's music room. The teacher wasn't there, but she decided to play softly on the old piano, the same one she had first touched months ago. The sound was rough, the keys uneven, but it didn't matter. As she played, she didn't notice that a few students had stopped by the door to listen. For the first time, they didn't laugh. They stood quietly, watching. When she finished, one of them said, almost in surprise, "You're actually getting good." She smiled shyly, unsure what to say. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. For the first time, she felt seen not as a joke, but as someone who was really trying. That night, when she went home, she looked out at the sky again. The stars were bright, and the world felt full of promise. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't stop now. The same girl who had been laughed at for touching the piano was no longer afraid. Her journey had just begun. After that small moment in the music room, the girl's heart was full of hope. For the first time, someone had noticed her effort. She went home that day feeling light, as if the world had shifted just a little in her favor. But she didn't know that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges that would test her patience, her confidence, and her faith in herself. The next few weeks were busy at school. The announcement for the talent show was posted on the main board. Many students were excited, talking about their performances and forming small groups to practice. Some planned to sing, others to dance, while a few wanted to perform in a play. The girl wrote her name quietly under the instrumental performance category. She didn't tell anyone, not even her close classmates. She knew that once people saw her name there, the whispers would start again. And she was right. The very next morning, while she was sitting in class, a few students began talking loudly. "Did you see her name on the list?" one said with a laugh. "She really thinks she can play piano now?" Another added, "She'll freeze on stage, watch." The girl kept her head down, pretending to write in her notebook, though her heart sank a little. She tried to remind herself why she was doing it, not to impress anyone, but to prove to herself that she could. That night she practiced longer than usual, playing the same short melody over and over again until her fingers ached. She wasn't perfect yet, but she could feel herself improving. Her parents could sense her determination. Even when the electricity went out, she would light a small candle and continue practicing on her keyboard. Her father would often walk past her room late at night, shaking his head in quiet disbelief. "She's serious about this," he would whisper to her mother. "I've never seen her work this hard for anything." But at school, not everyone appreciated her effort. A few classmates started teasing her more openly. They would mimic piano sounds or joke about her playing skills. Once, during lunch, someone shouted across the canteen, "Hey, play us a song. Maybe we'll laugh less this time." The whole table laughed. The girl tried to smile, pretending it didn't bother her, but when she got home that evening, she couldn't hold back her tears. She didn't tell anyone, not even her family. Instead, she went straight to her keyboard, wiped her eyes, and started playing. The sound of the keys calmed her. It reminded her why she loved music in the first place, not for others, but for herself. A week later, her music teacher announced that there would be practice sessions after school for all participants. It was her first real chance to play on the school piano again. When she walked into the room, the other students were already there. Some were confident and skilled. They played fast, their fingers gliding effortlessly. She felt small compared to them. When it was her turn, her palms were sweaty. She sat down in front of the piano, closed her eyes for a second, and took a deep breath. The first few notes came out fine, but then she pressed the wrong key. The sound was off. Someone giggled from the back of the room. She froze for a moment, then tried again, but her fingers trembled. The giggles turned into soft laughter. "I told you," someone whispered. "She can't even play properly." Her face turned red, and she quickly stood up, murmuring, "Sorry." The teacher gave her a short, polite smile and moved on to the next student. She sat in the corner quietly, feeling embarrassed. That night she thought about quitting. She told herself maybe everyone was right. Maybe she wasn't good enough. But as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she remembered how happy she felt every time she played at home. When no one was watching, there she didn't make mistakes because she wasn't afraid. "I can't let fear stop me," she whispered to herself. The next morning, she went back to practice before school started. She asked the janitor for the key to the music room, promising to return it before class. He agreed, and from then on, every morning she practiced alone in the quiet room, when no one else was around. Slowly, things started to change. Her fingers moved faster, and the melodies began to sound smoother. The mistakes became fewer. She started to feel the rhythm in her heart. Sometimes she would close her eyes and just let her hands follow the music. It was in those moments she forgot about everyone else. She felt free. One afternoon, her younger brother found her sitting at her keyboard at home, deeply focused. "You're getting really good," he said, his eyes wide.
"Can I record you?"
She hesitated, then nodded shyly. He took her father's old phone and recorded a short video of her playing her favorite melody. They both laughed when she made a small mistake at the end, but it was a happy moment. The next day, her brother showed the video to a friend who posted it online. The girl didn't think much of it until a few days later, when her brother came running to her room shouting, "People are watching your video." "Look," she stared at the screen in disbelief. There were dozens of comments, people saying how sweet and passionate her playing was. Some even wrote that she had talent and should keep going. For the first time, strangers believed in her. That small encouragement meant the world. It was like a light had been turned on inside her. She practiced even harder after that. Her classmates, however, had mixed reactions. A few congratulated her, but others were not so kind. "Anyone can get likes online," one said bitterly. "That doesn't mean you're good." Another added, "Let's see how you do at the show." She didn't answer them. She had learned that not everyone would be happy to see her grow. Instead, she focused on herself. A week later, something unexpected happened. A local piano teacher saw the video and sent her a message through the school principal. The teacher wanted to meet her. When she heard the news, she couldn't believe it. The principal introduced her to the teacher after school. The woman smiled warmly and said, "I saw your video. You have something special, not just talent, but heart. I'd like to help you learn properly if you're willing." The girl couldn't speak for a moment. She nodded quickly, her eyes shining. From that day, she began meeting the teacher twice a week after school. For the first time, she learned the right techniques: how to sit, how to move her hands, how to read simple music sheets. It was difficult at first, but she loved every minute of it. She listened carefully, practiced daily, and followed every piece of advice her teacher gave. The progress was amazing. Within weeks, her playing became smoother and more confident. Her teacher often smiled and said, "You remind me why I love teaching." Those words stayed with her. At school, people began to notice the change. When she played in the music room, the same students who once mocked her now listened quietly. Some even asked her to show them how she played certain songs. She didn't hold grudges. Instead, she helped them patiently. She had learned that kindness often speaks louder than pride, but deep down she knew the real test was coming: the talent show. Every night as the date drew closer, she practiced the same song repeatedly. It was a beautiful piece, emotional and powerful. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine herself on stage, under the bright lights with everyone watching silently as she played. It scared her, but it also excited her. One evening, while she was practicing, her father came to sit beside her. He didn't say much, just listened quietly. When she finished, he smiled softly and said, "I used to think dreams like this were not for people like us. But you've proven me wrong." She felt tears fill her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The night before the talent show, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about all the moments that had brought her here. The laughter, the failures, the endless nights of practice, the little victories. She was nervous, but she also felt proud. No matter what happened tomorrow, she had already come a long way from that shy girl who only dared to touch the piano when no one was looking. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she smiled faintly and said to herself, "Tomorrow I'll play not to prove them wrong, but to prove that I belong." And with that thought, she finally closed her eyes, ready for the biggest day of her life so far. The morning of the talent show arrived. The sun was bright, but the girl felt a storm of emotions inside her. Her hands were cold, her heart was racing, and her thoughts kept jumping from excitement to fear. She had practiced for weeks, but now that the moment was here, her confidence felt fragile. As she walked to school, the streets looked the same, yet everything felt different. Today, she wasn't just a student. She was about to stand on stage and show everyone what she had been quietly working on for so long. At school, the atmosphere was electric. The stage had been decorated with colorful lights, and the hall was filled with rows of chairs. Students were running around, fixing costumes and practicing lines. Some were laughing, others looked nervous like her. She found a quiet corner backstage and sat with her small music notebook in her lap. Her fingers moved over the pages she had filled with scribbled notes and small drawings of keys. This little notebook had been with her since the start of her journey. It reminded her of how far she had come. As she waited for her turn, she could hear the audience cheering for other performers. Some sang beautifully, others danced gracefully. Each cheer made her heart pound faster. She could feel sweat on her palms, and she rubbed them against her dress to stay calm. The music teacher came over and whispered, "You're doing fine. Just breathe. Play with your heart." She nodded silently. Then her name was called. The lights dimmed and her legs trembled as she walked toward the piano at the center of the stage. It looked larger than she remembered, glowing under the spotlight. She sat down, closed her eyes for a second, and took a slow breath. In that brief silence, she remembered everything. The laughter, the late nights, the candlelight practice, and the moments when she almost gave up. And then she began to play. The first note echoed softly through the hall. Then another. Her hands moved carefully but gracefully, the melody flowing like a quiet stream. The hall grew silent. Every sound, every key she pressed carried a piece of her story. It wasn't just a song. It was her struggle, her pain, her hope, and her dream all blended into music. Halfway through, she felt her nerves fade away. Her fingers seemed to move on their own, following the rhythm her heart had memorized. She forgot about the crowd. the lights, and even the competition. There was only the piano and her. When the last note faded, there was silence for a brief moment. A stillness so deep it made her heart stop. Then applause. It started softly, then grew louder and louder until the whole hall was clapping. She looked up, blinking in disbelief. Her classmates were standing. Even those who had mocked her before were clapping. Some were smiling, others looked surprised. The music teacher had tears in her eyes. She mouthed the words, "You did it." The girl felt her chest fill with emotion. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She stood up, bowed slightly, and walked off the stage with shaky legs but a steady heart. Backstage, she took a deep breath and sat down. Her hands were still trembling, but now it wasn't fear. It was relief, joy, and pride. She didn't know what the judges would decide, but she already felt like she had won. Later that afternoon, when the results were announced, her name was called for second place. For a second, she was stunned. She couldn't believe it. The first place winner was an older student who had been learning piano for years, but that didn't matter to her. She had achieved more than she ever thought possible. The entire hall cheered for her. As she walked up to receive her certificate, she saw her classmates smiling genuinely for the first time. That night, when she got home, her family was waiting with open arms. Her little brother jumped up and down, shouting, "You did it!" Her mother hugged her tightly, tears running down her cheeks. Her father just looked at her quietly, his eyes full of pride. "I always knew you could," he said softly. That was the first time he had said something like that. She smiled and hugged him back. After the show, something in her life began to change. People at school started treating her differently. The same classmates who once made fun of her now asked how she had learned to play. Some even apologized for their old behavior. "We didn't know you were this good," one of them said. She didn't hold any grudges. She simply smiled and said, "I just kept practicing." The music teacher, who had been quietly watching her progress, introduced her to more advanced pieces. "You've proven you can learn on your own," she said. "Now it's time to challenge yourself." She handed her a new music sheet, a more complicated one. At first glance, it looked impossible, but the girl only nodded. She had learned that nothing was truly impossible if she loved it enough. Every day after school, she practiced in the music room. The teacher would guide her, correcting her posture, her timing, her touch. Sometimes she made mistakes, and sometimes she grew frustrated, but she never gave up. The music teacher often said, "Remember, emotion matters more than perfection." Those words stayed with her. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened again. The video of her talent show performance had been uploaded online by another student. It started spreading quietly at first, but soon people began sharing it. Viewers were touched by the simplicity and passion in her playing. Comments poured in, strangers encouraging her, praising her for her dedication. One comment said, "You can feel her heart in every note." Another said, "This girl is proof that talent can come from anywhere." When she saw those words, she couldn't believe it. For so long, she had been told she wasn't good enough, and now, people from different places were saying the opposite. It was overwhelming. The local piano teacher who had once offered her lessons saw the video too. One afternoon, she called and said, "You've come a long way. I'd like to help you go further." The girl started visiting her every weekend for lessons. The teacher didn't charge her anything, saying, "This is my gift to you. You remind me of what pure passion looks like." Under her guidance, the girl's skill improved faster than ever. She learned how to play by ear, how to feel the emotion in each piece, how to tell a story through sound. The lessons were hard, but she loved every challenge. Months passed, and her confidence grew. She began performing at small school events, community gatherings, and even at the local library. Each time she noticed how people listened, really listened. Some closed their eyes, smiling softly. Others came up afterward to thank her for the music. She realized that her dream wasn't just about proving people wrong anymore. It was about sharing something beautiful with others. Her music started opening doors she never imagined. A local newspaper featured her story, the girl who taught herself the piano. They wrote about her struggles, her dedication, and her growing success. The article ended with the line, "She didn't wait for a chance. She created one." When she read it, her eyes filled with tears. She never thought her name would appear in a newspaper for something good. At school, her classmates began looking up to her. A few younger students even came to her for help, asking her to teach them basic piano skills. She happily agreed. After all, she knew exactly how it felt to start from nothing. But behind her calm smile, she knew there was still more she wanted to achieve. Her dream had grown bigger now. She didn't just want to play. She wanted to study music properly, to understand it deeply, and maybe one day perform on bigger stages. Her family supported her completely. Her father started saving small amounts from his earnings, saying, "Maybe one day we can get you a real piano." Her mother often sat beside her during practice, just listening quietly, proud of the daughter who had turned her dream into reality. Every night, as she looked at the little keyboard that had been with her from the beginning, she felt grateful. It was old and worn now, but it reminded her of the journey, the laughter, the pain, the lonely nights, and the endless faith that kept her going. One evening, while practicing a soft emotional piece, she looked out the window and saw a few neighborhood kids standing outside, listening through the open window. When she finished, they clapped shyly. One of them said, "You play so beautifully." She smiled and replied, "Thank you. You can do it too if you practice." That moment made her heart warm. She realized that what started as a personal dream was now inspiring others, and that feeling, that her music could touch people, was worth more than any trophy or medal. Her story had reached a point where the laughter of the past no longer mattered. What mattered was how far she had come, and how many hearts she could reach through her piano. She knew this was just the beginning. The next chapter of her journey would not be about proving herself anymore. It would be about sharing her light with others, one note at a time. The following months passed in quiet determination. The girl's days became longer, filled with school, study, and endless hours of practice. Her music had started to open doors she never imagined, but with every opportunity came new challenges. One morning, her music teacher at school called her aside. "There's an inter-school competition next month," the teacher said gently. "It's not small. Schools from all over the district will be there. I think you should take part." The girl froze for a moment. Competing at a district level felt terrifying. She had never played in front of such a large audience before. But deep down, she knew this was her next step. She took a deep breath and said softly, "I'll try." From that day, her schedule became even tighter. She practiced before dawn, during lunch breaks, and long after sunset. Her fingers sometimes hurt, but she didn't mind. Every mistake she made became another lesson. Her teacher guided her patiently, reminding her to play from the heart and not just follow the notes. At home, her little brother would sit beside her while she practiced. Sometimes, when she grew frustrated, he would make funny faces to cheer her up. "You'll win," he would say confidently. His faith in her was unshakable even when hers wasn't. As the competition day grew closer, her nerves returned. She began doubting herself again. What if she made a mistake on stage? What if she froze in front of everyone? These thoughts haunted her at night. One evening, as she sat staring at her keyboard, her father came and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've worked hard," he said quietly. "Don't think about winning or losing. Just play like you always do, with love." Those words calmed her. She realized she wasn't competing against anyone but herself. The day of the competition arrived. The venue was far from her town, a big auditorium filled with bright lights and hundreds of people. When she entered, she felt small and nervous. She could see students from other schools, many dressed neatly, carrying folders and instruments that looked far more professional than hers. Some were warming up on their sleek pianos or violins. She had only her determination and her teacher's words echoing in her heart. When it was finally her turn, she walked up to the stage slowly. Her palms were sweaty and her legs trembled. The piano looked enormous, shining under the lights. For a brief second, she wanted to run away, but then she heard a small voice inside her say, "You've done this before. Just breathe." She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. The first few notes came out shaky, but she didn't stop. Slowly, she found her rhythm. Each key she pressed brought back memories of where she had started. The laughter, the loneliness, the nights under candlelight, and the sound of her old keyboard. She wasn't just playing a song. She was telling her story through music. As the melody grew stronger, the fear faded away. The hall became quiet. The sound of her piano filled the air, soft, emotional, powerful. Every note carried a part of her journey. She played as if the piano and her heart were one. When she finished, the final note hung in the air for a moment before fading into silence. For a few seconds, there was no sound at all. Then came the applause. Soft at first, then louder, until the whole room was clapping. She bowed her head, her eyes wet with tears she hadn't realized were there. Backstage, her teacher hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "You didn't just play well, yet you moved people." The girl smiled through her tears. She didn't even care about the results anymore. The applause had already told her everything she needed to know. When the winners were announced later, she didn't win first place, but she earned the special jury award for emotional expression in music. To her, that meant more than any medal. She held the small certificate in her hands, feeling like it weighed more than gold. The journey home that night was quiet. She sat by the window of the bus, watching the city lights pass by. Her heart was peaceful. She thought about the people who once laughed at her, and the small girl who had first touched the piano out of curiosity. She had come so far. Over the next few months, things changed even more. Her performance video from the competition was shared by the event organizers, and soon it started gaining attention online. People were touched by her story. A girl who had taught herself practiced on a broken keyboard, and won hearts through pure dedication. Messages began to pour in from strangers, students, parents, and even other musicians who said her story inspired them. Some said she reminded them to never give up on their dreams. She read every message with tears in her eyes, amazed at how her small dream had reached so many people. Her school principal called her to the office one morning and said, "We've received a letter. A community music foundation wants to sponsor your studies." She couldn't believe it. Someone she had never met wanted to help her continue her journey. Her family was overjoyed. For them, it felt like a miracle. With that support, she joined a proper music institute in the nearby city. The first few weeks were hard. She was surrounded by students who had been learning music since childhood. They read sheet music fluently, while she was still learning the basics. But she didn't feel discouraged. She had faced worse before. She knew that dedication could close any gap. Every morning she would travel by bus to the city, attend classes, and come home late at night. The routine was exhausting, but she didn't complain. She was finally living her dream, studying music in a real place under real teachers. One evening, her new instructor asked her to perform a small solo in front of the class. She hesitated at first, remembering how nervous she used to be. But as soon as she started playing, the familiar calmness returned. When she finished, her instructor smiled and said, "You play with emotion. That's something no one can teach, and it comes from within." That compliment stayed with her. She realized that what made her music special wasn't perfection, but feeling. It was the same feeling that had carried her through every hardship, the same one that connected her to the piano in the first place. Back in her hometown, people began to talk about her proudly. The same classmates who once laughed now told others about how they knew her. Some even said she had inspired them to try new things. She didn't let the attention get to her head. She stayed humble, still practicing on her old keyboard whenever she came home on weekends. One day, her little brother asked, "Do you remember the first time you played on this keyboard?" She smiled. "How could I forget?" He laughed and said, "You've come so far." "I knew you would." She hugged him tightly. "You were the first one who believed in me," she said softly. As time went on, her love for music only grew stronger. She started composing small pieces of her own, tunes that reflected her journey, her hopes, and the quiet beauty of everyday life. Her teacher at the institute noticed her talent for composing and encouraged her to perform one of her original pieces at the annual concert. When the day came, she was nervous, but not afraid. She sat at the grand piano, looked out at the audience, and smiled. Among the crowd, she spotted her parents and brother sitting in the front row, their faces glowing with pride. Then she began to play. The melody she had written was simple but filled with heart. It spoke of struggle, courage, and love, the things that had shaped her life. As she played, the entire hall fell silent. When the last note faded, the applause that followed was deafening. She stood, bowed, and smiled through tears. That night, as she returned home, her father said, "You've turned your pain into something beautiful." "That's a gift very few people have." She didn't reply. She just looked at the stars through the window and felt a deep peace inside her. Her journey had started with ridicule and loneliness, but now it had become a story of hope, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't do something. And yet she knew this wasn't the end. It was only another beginning. There were still higher stages to reach, more music to learn, and more hearts to touch. But now she wasn't the same uncertain girl who once doubted herself. She had found her strength in every note she played. Her music had become her voice, and that voice was only getting louder. Months passed after her performance at the Institute concert, but the memory of that night stayed with her. Something had changed inside her. She no longer played the piano out of fear or desperation. Now she played out of love, with calm confidence that came from believing in herself. Her music teacher saw the spark in her and encouraged her to audition for a national-level youth music program that supported young, self-taught artists. It was a big opportunity, one that could open doors she never thought possible. When she first heard about it, she hesitated. "I'm not good enough," she said quietly. But her teacher shook her head. "You are ready. Don't let doubt decide for you." That night she sat in her room staring at the old keyboard that had once been her only friend. The keys were worn out, the edges chipped, but it was still precious to her. She ran her fingers gently over it and smiled. "We've come a long way," she whispered. She decided to apply for the audition. The application asked for a short video of her playing an original composition. So she set up her phone on a stack of books, pressed record, and began to play. The piece she chose was something she had written recently, a tune that told the story of her journey. From ridicule to realization, from loneliness to confidence. When she finished, she uploaded the video, unsure of what would happen next. Weeks passed with no response. She tried not to think about it too much and focused on her studies. But one evening, she received an email that made her heart skip a beat. She'd been selected for the final round of auditions in the city. It was unbelievable. She sat there staring at the screen, unable to stop smiling. Her parents gathered around her, reading the message again and again. Her mother wiped her eyes, whispering, "You did it, my girl." The days leading up to the audition were a blur. She practiced endlessly, refining every part of her piece. Her teacher guided her patiently, helping her perfect the small details, the pauses, the dynamics, the emotion in each note. "Don't try to impress," her teacher reminded her. "Just be yourself. That's what makes you special." The morning of the audition arrived. The venue was a grand auditorium in the city, much bigger than the one where she had performed before. Musicians from all over the country were there, each talented, each confident. Some played instruments she had never even seen before, but she didn't let that intimidate her. She reminded herself of how far she had come. She thought about her small town, her broken keyboard, her family's sacrifices, and every moment that had brought her here. When her name was called, she walked to the stage slowly, her heart pounding. The bright lights felt blinding for a moment, but then she took a deep breath and looked at the piano. It wasn't just an instrument, it was home. She began to play. The hall filled with her melody, soft, deep, and full of life. Every note carried a story, of a little girl who once sat alone, mocked by others but too stubborn to give up. Of nights spent in silence with nothing but her music, of moments of fear that turned into strength. Her hands moved gracefully, her eyes closed. She wasn't thinking anymore, she was feeling. When the final note faded, there was silence again, the kind of silence that means people are holding their breath. Then came the applause, loud and genuine. The judges smiled warmly. One of them said, "You have something very rare, honesty in your music." Those words stayed with her more than anything else. A few weeks later, the results were announced. She had been selected for the program. Not just that, she was among the top 5 musicians chosen from across the country. Her family couldn't stop crying tears of joy. Her teacher hugged her and said, "This is just the beginning," and it truly was. The next few months changed her life completely. She received professional training, played alongside other young musicians, and even got the chance to perform in front of large audiences. She was interviewed by local newspapers and invited to talk about her story, not as someone who won a competition, but as someone who proved that passion could overcome any obstacle. Yet despite all the attention, she stayed grounded. She never forgot where she came from. Every weekend she returned home and practiced on the same old keyboard that had started it all. When people asked her why she still used it, she simply smiled and said, "It reminds me to stay humble." Her music videos started gaining attention online. One of them, the same audition piece, and went viral. People from around the world commented about how her music touched their hearts. Many said they didn't even understand the language, but the emotion spoke for itself. One day she received an invitation to perform on a national television show. It felt unreal. She sat in disbelief holding the letter. Her father read it out loud, his voice shaking with pride. "They want you to perform live next month," he said. "The whole country will see you." The day of the show arrived. Backstage, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She could hear the audience talking, the cameras clicking, and the sound of the host's voice echoing through the speakers. When her turn came, she walked to the piano under the bright studio lights. She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play her heart out. This time she wasn't nervous. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just wanted to share her story through her music, the story of a girl who never gave up. As she played, the audience grew quiet. Some people closed their eyes, swaying gently to the melody. The camera zoomed in on her fingers, moving gracefully over the keys. Every note seemed to carry warmth, honesty, and hope. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming. The host came up to her, visibly moved. "That was beautiful," he said. "Your music speaks to the soul." Her story spread quickly after that. She was invited to perform at schools and events across the country. Everywhere she went, people told her how her journey inspired them. She met children who said they had started learning piano after hearing about her. Some parents thanked her for reminding them to believe in their kids' dreams. One evening, after returning from a concert, she sat alone at her window, looking at the stars. Her life had changed completely, but deep down she was still that same small-town girl who had once dreamed in silence. She thought about all the people who had helped her along the way, her teacher, her parents, her brother, and whispered a quiet thank you. But her journey wasn't just about success or fame. It was about proving that no dream is too small and no beginning too humble. She started with nothing, just curiosity, a broken keyboard, and a belief that music could heal. And that belief had carried her all the way to where she stood now. In one of her interviews, a reporter asked, "What would you say to those who laughed at you back then?" She smiled gently and said, "I'd thank them. They gave me the fire to keep going." Her words were simple but powerful. They showed the grace of someone who had turned pain into art. A few years later, she released her first album. It wasn't flashy or filled with complicated compositions. Instead, it was made up of melodies inspired by her own journey, quiet pieces full of heart and emotion. The album quickly became popular, not because of big promotions, but because people felt something real in her music. At the launch event, she stood on stage surrounded by people who believed in her teacher, her family, her friends, and even some of the students who now looked up to her. She looked at the audience and said softly, "I started playing when no one believed in me. Today I play because I believe in myself. If you have a dream, no matter how impossible it seems, don't stop. One day your music, when whatever form it takes, will be heard." The crowd applauded, and she smiled through her tears. That night, when she returned home, she walked into her small room, where her old keyboard still sat by the window. She ran her fingers over it, remembering the first time she touched those keys. She pressed a few notes, and even though the sound was imperfect, it felt warm and familiar. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for never leaving me." Outside, the wind carried the soft tune through the night, the same tune that had once been laughed at, now echoing as a symbol of courage and hope. Her journey wasn't just about music anymore. It was about believing in yourself even when no one else does. It was about finding beauty in the struggle and turning pain into purpose. And though the world now saw her as a rising star, in her heart she was still that same girl, the one who sat alone by a window, dreaming of a day when her music would finally be heard. That day had come.